Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, a show about writing and publishing with your host, J.F. Gerard.
Welcome to another episode of the Artsy Raven, and today our special guest is Mike Bockoven. So Mike writes thriller and horror novels while his kids are in gymnastic class or at piano lessons. He lives with his wife Sarah, two daughters, and an exceptionally dumb wiener dog named Sherlock. He lives in Grand Island, Nebraska. And in the podcast notes, we'll list his website and social media links, so check them out after you finish this podcast. So Mike, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So tell me a little bit about yourself and how you started writing.
Cool, thank you. I need to update my bio a little bit because my kids are no longer in piano lessons, and we've got a couple more dumb wiener dogs to add to the collection. But yeah, the basic gist is I was a reporter for about 7 years, kind of local newspaper sort of stuff, and had always kind of had a little bit of writing in my blood, always had that as something that I enjoyed doing. And so I put on my bucket list at one point, you never know when you do these things, that I wanted to have a couple books on my bookshelf with my name on them, just one way or the other. I'm also a big genre guy. I love horror. I love thrillers. I love noir. I love sci-fi. All those sort of things are really right in my wheelhouse. So as I was creeping up on 40, I was like, well, maybe I ought to do this, at some point, because if you don't, no one's going to do it for you. So I took a whole bunch of kind of little scraps of time that I had, which is why that's in my bio, my kids in piano lessons. And I could either drive home and hang out for 20 minutes and drive back, or I could sit in the car and maybe get some work done. And so I just kind of wedged it into, the little nooks and crannies of my life. Cause, I've got like a lot of us artists, I got a full-time job. I've got a lot of other obligations, and was able to get a book out that way. And the book, FantasticLand, has been out for 5-6 years, somewhere in there, and it's done pretty well. And ever since then, I've written two other books, and that I'm proud of, and we're in negotiations for my fourth. So it's the kind of thing that just kind of kept rolling after I taught myself, or after I proved to myself that I could do it, which is kind of fun.
That's pretty cool. So what kind of journalism did you do, and did it help you with your writing?
Great question, thank you. It was community journalism. So I live here in Grand Island, Nebraska, which is a town of about 50,000-60,000 people, somewhere in there, and it was just basically that kind of hyper-focused local journalism. So lots of ribbon cuttings, lots of library board meetings, lots of I've been kicked out of City Hall once or twice. I've got bar stories to kind of last me a little while. So yes, it definitely helped. And part of the reason it helped, I think, is because it gave me a little bit more of a fascination with the way people talk, and the way people present themselves, and the way that their personalities come through when they talk. So FantasticLand, the first book, is an epistolary novel. It's done in the interview format. So every chapter is an interview with somebody, and the stories kind of interlock together to form a narrative, and then you as the reader have to decide how trustworthy you think that narrative is or not. And so I don't make it easy on the reader. I give you a lot of question marks at the end of the day. So yeah, I think it definitely helped, just in that I got to talk to hundreds of people, different people, and each one of them you try to accurately represent what they say, but also how they said it. That was kind of the next level. So that's what I enjoyed about it.
So tell me a little bit about Fantasticland and what's the sort of synopsis?
Okay, cool. The story of FantasticLand, and we'll get into the reading that I'll have to set up later, is that it's a story about a hurricane that hits a Disney or Universal style theme park. So this theme park is built in a place where they think a hurricane's never going to hit. Climate change happens, a hurricane hits a little closer, or a little further inland than anybody thought, and it strands a couple hundred of the employees of this theme park in the park. And since they have food or water, they're not rescued immediately, so they get to kind of hang out for 3 weeks to a month. And in that time frame, they go feral. They go back to their parts of the park. They form little tribes or little gangs, and those gangs engage in terrible gang warfare. And when they finally do get rescued, things are in a real bad way. So that's the plot of FantasticLand.
So what inspired such a horrible tale?
This is so terrible, but a trip to Disney. So yeah, I'm kind of a pessimist at heart, and so while I did have a great time, and it's one of those great American traditions you do with your kids while they're younger. Part of me was always looking around, going, "Huh, what could go wrong here?" And so that was really the inspiration. Is I got back from a long planned trip to Disney World, and we and at one point, the right song hit at the right time that kind of inspired an idea, and that idea snowballed, and that was kind of where it started. And it was one of those things where when I wrote it in about 3 to 4 months. It was kind of a concentrated time frame. I thought it was a good idea, and it looks like it was. So not all my ideas are good ones by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, you could do some genre stuff with this.
Cool. Like, I'm really impressed by how you have focused and like used all your little bits of time to write a book. I'm still trying to gather my wits to do that, especially with children interrupting half the time.
Yeah, you've got to, or the way I did it, and everybody's. When I talk to people, I've gotten smarter about this because I wasn't real smart when I started, because everybody's brain works differently. But if you can figure out how your brain works and where you can focus that, then you kind of find those little bits of time and you guard them real tight, right? It's like when I'm just sitting out in a car and there's nothing else to do, your brain has to focus on something. And that's the way my brain works. And some people can write in a crowded coffee shop. Some people need absolute solitude, that I used to tell people how I did it and go, you can do it too. But ever since, that's not real smart. The smart thing is to say, figure out what your brain does, and see if you can do it. But yeah, motivation, uh nothing like a birthday milestone to kind of light a fire under you to get something done.
Now, do you have a carrot? Like after you're done something, do you like have a chocolate bar or anything like that?
Question. No, I don't. What I do is, the way I've hacked my brain kind of is to do the same thing every single time I sit down to write. So I've got like a 6 or 7 step process where you just sit down, then you do this, then you do this, then you listen, turn on this kind of music, and then because right now I'm sitting in my office and the lights off, and or the overhead lights off, and the lamp is on. That's how I know it's time to do the creative stuff as opposed to everything else I do. That's what works for me. So I don't know, but yeah, if you haven't already heard, there's a dog barking in the background. So yeah, I mean there are distractions everywhere. They want to
Okay,
take your time.
so the next few books, are they related to Fantastic Land
No,
that you're working on?
they are straight novels. Although the one that I'm currently in negotiations for is the same format, and that one I can't say too much about because we haven't signed the contracts yet. But the second one is a werewolf novel set in Nebraska that I kind of like, and I had aspirations for a series that never really panned out. And then my last one, which came out about this time last year, is called Killing It, and it's a kind of The Shining in a comedy club sort of idea. Although I don't want to compare it to something as lofty as The Shining. It's a supernatural spirit kind of makes someone go bad. There are a bunch of comics in the basement in the green room where the cell phones don't go. He's done some bad stuff up top. They're downstairs. They have to get out. Game on, that sort of thing. And I think that book's a lot of fun
Now, all your books sort of sound like thriller, horror kind of
too.
genre. Is there a reason why that's your favorite genre to try to focus on?
Two things. One of them is I understand on an intellectual level and respect that horror is, um, I don't want to say easy, but is less challenging than maybe going straight at something that someone would consider literary. I try to be very, literate and try to imbue, themes and all these sort of things. But at the end of the day, I like the gross stuff. So I really want to, I really want to. If I make you say "ew" when you're reading one of my books, that's probably what I'm looking out for. But I also have just been a genre fan since I was 6. I mean, you watch that one horror movie too early, and it does something to your
Yeah.
brain. And
Yeah.
I saw a cartoon a ways back where it's a teenager sitting wearing a horror T-shirt with his hair, kind of in a punk rock cut, and he goes, "It's not a phase, mom." And then they cut to him at age 40, and he goes, "Oh my god, it wasn't." And that's me. It's not a phase. It's just been something I've done my whole life. I've got my zombie arm tattoo, going that I'm able
Oh,
to keep from the world. But to those who know me, that's where my brain's at. I love that stuff. So.
It's like your secret life, like after you go to City
I know,
Hall.
it kind of is.
Oh,
It kind
right.
of is, yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I work in kind of a respectable job right now, and it's like I always make sure the tattoos are covered, and I always make sure that I don't get too off the rails when I'm talking about that sort of stuff. So,
Yeah, because you don't know who you're talking to sometimes.
yeah,
So
it's
yeah.
not for everybody. It's not for everybody, but it's for me.
So while you're growing up, do you think some writers have influenced you heavily in these
Totally.
genres?
The ones that stick out of my mind, I think everybody read their Stephen King book too early. Mine was It when I was 12. That was a little early for
Yeah.
that sort of thing, but it did some good, did some good stuff. I also got into Clive Barker. Clive Barker
Oh
was
yes, the books of blood.
just yeah, it's just still one of those writers who you read what he does, and it's like, how are you doing this? It's like I can't even begin to think how you're doing what you're doing, but it's working. It's like that's Clive Barker to me. I was introduced a little bit later, like around 18, 19, to Joe R. Lansdale. Do you know him?
Mm-mm.
I cannot recommend Joe Lansdale enough
Okay,
because
I'll look him up.
he's this Texas fried genre guy. He's most well known for his Hap and Leonard novels, which are kind of noir, but he is just so clever and has such a distinctive voice. And when he writes horror, it's one of those things where you just sit there with your jaw on the ground. He wrote a three-part horror, three novels that were part of the same story called Drive-In, and the third Drive-In movie or novel ends. I don't want to spoil it too hard, but it ends kind of like that Looney Tunes cartoon Duck Amuck, where Daffy Duck is making fun of or is painting Daffy Duck and making him go crazy. It's one of those things where I'm sitting there reading, going, "This is incredible." So yeah, Joe Lansdale is one of my favorites. And then the last thing I'll say, I don't want to take too much time, is that I have found the horror community to be extremely welcoming. And the thing that's cool about horror right now is you can find everything. If you want splatterpunk, if you want gross stuff, it's out there. If you want very literary stuff, if you want stuff from voices that you can't get other places, like one of the biggest horror writers right now is Seth Graham Jones, and he, a Native American gentleman whom I've talked to a couple times, and is just the most gracious dude who writes some fantastic horror. And it's just whatever it is that scares you or that excites you or that makes you interested in that, it's out there, and I would encourage people to get involved because it's a really welcoming community.
Oh, are you part of the Horror Writers Association? I keep hearing about them.
I'm not. I need to be.
It's okay. It's okay. It's like
I
these
downloaded the
clubs that
application
writers
like
join. Yeah.
downloaded the application like 6 times, and it's like I just haven't done it yet. I need to.
I
I
know. I
know people who
like
are. It's a good thing. I support them. I'm just not a member yet.
cool, cool. So, I mean, how do you over time, like, do you do different courses or do you do anything to sort of think about how you write or write better or
Oh, good question. That is a real good question. So I think my what I do on that front is just consume a lot, right? Read a lot, watch a lot of horror, or not all the time, but keep up on the current horror movies and the current horror books, and being part of the community, you kind of see how people react to
Mhm.
certain things. The stuff that I write, and this is going to sound terribly indulgent, I'm afraid, but it's like because my time is this, I've really got to focus and I've really got to
Yeah.
jump in and do stuff. And the problem with I'm also a discovery writer, so I don't map stuff out all that much. And the thing that sucks about that is I've got probably three novels that are 80% done, and I've gotten to the end and I'm like, oh, this isn't going to work. I can't make this work, that sort of thing. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, I would need to go back and rewrite the whole thing, and that's kind of the curse of being a discovery writer. But in order to get better, I would say consume. I would say watch a lot, read a lot, and then do a lot. And I think it's for me, it's reps. For me, it's practice. For me, I hope I'm getting better because I've done it for 6, 7 years now, actively, as opposed to not. I should take some courses. I should do some of these things. I always one of the first things I always get when I talk to when I'm editing a book is, man, I'm not a real good copy editor. My copy is not clean when you get it. So um, that's something I could work on. But yeah, good question.
No, it's hit and miss. I mean, I've taken courses and I had
Hmm.
one instructor that like I think it was a novel writing course and I was writing
Sure.
like a vampire novel and she totally did not understand vampires, so it was really difficult because like
Oh, really?
yeah, so it depends on your instructor, I think. at the
Yeah.
time as well. So, but anyhow,
Well, I think voice is really important too. I mean, like if you come at something and it's complicated, but you're good at explaining it, or if it's different but you're confident about it, I think the reader can tell. I think if you, if you come at something in your mind very clearly and find a way of conveying it clearly, it's going to work. You know.
yeah, because I write like East meets West stuff, and these vampires weren't sucking
Cool.
blood, they were sucking chi energy. And I was trying to
Oh,
explain to
fun.
her, it's like the Force, and she's like, I don't know what that is, and I'm like, okay, because she's a literary writer, right? So I'm like, oh gosh, but everyone else in the class were like, we know exactly what you're talking about, but
Yeah, yeah. It
anyhow, I
works
said, okay,
for
let's
us,
just
but
not focus on that. Let's focus on some other aspect on it, you know.
well,
So
no,
whatever.
95% of your readers are going to grab right onto that, though. You know, I mean, I don't think you're going to lose anyone by talking about chi or the force or anything. But that's me.
Yeah.
I'm a genre guy, so
Yeah, true enough, true enough. Okay, now you're working on a whole bunch of other projects, and they'll
yeah.
eventually be done. And
Yep. The one that I'm hoping to get the contract signed for here in the next couple of weeks is another epistolary book. It's like FantasticLand. It's the same sort of situation. It's not supernatural. It's more of a thriller, but it's also that interview style. So I'm hoping that comes across. And again, don't want to hope too hard, but I wrote that in probably about 2.5 months. Just one of those ideas where it's like, oh, I think this could work, and then just charge at it. You know.
now, why interview style? Like, I know it's very like not very many books have that interview style, to be honest. Like,
Mhm.
it's very like it just
Uh,
describes.
two reasons why I don't think you see a lot of them is one, it's difficult. I mean, in order to capture voices, that is one of the most challenging things. I'm not saying, oh, I do this big difficult thing. No, I struggle like hell to make sure everybody sounds distinctive, or at least can set themselves up to sound distinctive later down the road. That's not easy, and that takes a lot of time. And it's something where I'm kind of uniquely situated, having that journalism background, to do that. I would like to see more. I love first person. I love epistolary. I always say that if I ever meet Max Brooks, who wrote World War Z, I owe him a steak. Just because I didn't rip him off, but let's just say that was an inspiration. But the other thing that I love about it is I am always interested in someone's experience, especially when it comes to horror, right? It's like there are, I love me a good Friday the 13th movie, but about the fourth or fifth kill, most people are kind of rolling their eyes just because, oh, it's just one more kid. Oh, was this the funny one? I don't know. I love it when there's a little bit of an impact there. I love it when, you feel the knife hit the bone as opposed to just see the spurt of blood and run away. Anything you can do to kind of make it a little more human, I think is where I enjoy horror, and that's where I try to come at it from. An interview allows you to do that.
Well, definitely. I think people are more desensitized now, and
Yeah.
it's different. Like, yeah, the human aspect, I think, is it sort of makes a connection with the reader, and makes it easier for them to attach themselves to the character.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Well, there's that old phrase that if you stub your toe, everyone knows in a movie, everybody recoils because everyone knows what that feels like. But if someone is, hit in the head with an axe, you don't recoil because no one knows what that feels like, right? If you can kind of split that middle ground and make it as human as you can, that's where I try to come at it from. But sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
cool. So, Mike, you're going to do a reading. Could you tell us a little bit about what you're going to read to give us a little bit of context before you start?
Totally. So I will say real quick, and this is an aside, is that the fantastic or the audiobook of Fantasticland is better than the written book because they had a couple actual actors come in and do a lot of the parts. I am not an actor, so this if my fumbling attempt at trying to act sounds at all interesting, I would really encourage you to check out the audiobook because Angela Dawes and Luke Dawson come and do that, and they do a really good job, and I can't praise them enough for it. But okay, so here's the setup is that I'm reading a chapter from a gentleman named, sorry, I got to jump to the table of contents. A gentleman named Aaron Hoffman, who is a father who has 2 kids and a wife, and they're at Fantasticland at this theme park as the hurricane is sweeping in. And when I start the reading, they have been alerted that there might be bad weather, but it's just sort of becoming apparent that they're going to need to evacuate the park. Okay, so here's Aaron's story. We finished our breakfast and went and got on the buses that take you to the park. And right off the bat, there's not a lot of traffic going there. There's a ton going away from the park, but not a lot going toward it, which was the opposite of the day before. Suzanne looked real nervous, so I got on the phone and was going to show her what the weather app or what the weather was doing when I saw which way the storm was headed. The night before, it had been threatening to hit Palm and Martin counties, but the alerts were getting further north and further inland, and soon they were putting notices in Okeechobee and Cecilia counties were in the path of this thing. The kids didn't notice, but I went up to the driver and showed him my phone, and he was very concerned too. He said we were going to pull up to the gates, and if there were instructions, we'd get them there. It's a 20-minute ride from the front gates of FantasticLand to the hotel, and in that 20 minutes, things have gone from it might get bad to it's going to get bad. The clouds were dark and the wind picked up, and Suzanne and I were ready to get on the nearest bus the hell out of Florida. Once we pull up, there's a crowd of people waiting to get on the bus. There are some employees and there's some early birds and some maintenance folks. It was all kinds. The word had gone out. We were going to get hit and they were closing the park. Get out if you can. There was a woman there in a security outfit reading off who had a spot on the bus and who had to wait for the next one. She had this big booming voice and was yelling, "If you need medication, if you are over 60 years old, if your family is already evacuated," stuff like that. But no one was listening. Every square inch of that bus was prime real estate at that point. The bus driver threw open the doors, and I heard Suzanne yell, "Kendall!" Kendall's his kid, and Kendall is off the bus in a split second before all the people desperate to get on start pushing their way in. I see him get knocked down, and at that point, instinct took over. I look at Suzanne and I say, "I've got him," and I go into beast mode. I'm pushing and shoving and using my legs to pry people apart. I take an elbow to the eye, and I swear someone grabbed my stomach and twisted as hard as they could. I had a bruise, and it looked more like a kick, but it felt like someone was twisting my skin, but I didn't care. I got in a few good shots. I used to play high school sports, so I can dish it out if I needed to, but it had been a while. So I fight and I fight, and I take a couple of minutes to get to him. And when I do, it's already started to rain. So here's me fighting a crowd trying to get on the bus. And when I find Kendall, he's outside, he's wet, he's crying. And I said, I wanted to go see the pirates again between sobs. I hadn't heard him cry like that since he had night terrors when he was 3, just gulping and gulping for air. Then out of nowhere, this guy shows up. He's tall and he's got this weird beard and mustache thing going. And I recognize he's one of the pirates from yesterday who worked at the park. He got his picture taken with Kendall. I recognize him and he sees me recognize him. And he sort of comes up behind and puts his hand on Kendall's shoulder and said, "Ahoy there, little man," in his pirate voice. Kendall looks up and it takes him a second, but we recognize the guy too. And the pirate says, "I'll never forget it. We've got some rough seas ahead, boyo. A pirate can be scared, but a pirate don't quit. Got it?" Kendall, God love him, stopped crying, or at least started crying less, and says, "A pirate doesn't quit." Then Kendall asks, "Where's your costume?" And the guy, without missing a beat, says, "I had to leave it in Davy Jones's locker." And then he keeps walking to wherever it was he was going, like it wasn't a big thing. But it was a big thing. I don't know who that guy was, but if I ever meet him, I'm going to shake his hand. I might give him a hug. If I ever meet the guy who allowed the buses to go in the park till 10 in the morning, I'm going to kick him square in the nuts. I quickly text Suzanne because the bus was long gone at that point, and I tell her we're okay and to let me know where she's going so Kendall and I can get there too. Keep in mind, there's this giant wave of people and other folks in security outfits yelling instructions. No one can hear over the rain and wind, which started coming up. I tell Kendall to hang on to me, and we muscle our way to the front where I explain to the lady in the security outfit what happened. She says, "You're on the next bus. Don't let anyone tell you different," which pissed off some guy in the row behind me. "You bitch," he yelled as loud as he could, and I told Kendall to cover his ears, and I laid into the guy, calling him the selfish asshole and how dare he swear in front of my kid and all that sort of thing. My Irish was already up after fighting my way off the bus, so I wasn't holding back. The security lady kind of smiled at me, which made me feel good and made me feel like we were sure going to get a seat on that bus. Other people from the crowd kind of calmed down, and it was okay until the buses showed up, and then I knew we were in trouble. There was this fleet of buses. I stopped counting at 35. They just kept coming in a straight line. The thing that I noticed was they weren't all like luxury coaches. There was every kind of vehicle you could think of that could hold more than 8 people. There were big fans and trams, and I think I even saw a limo in there. It was obvious what was happening. This was an evacuation. The sight of all those vehicles calmed everyone right down, and they just started packing on. We got on the next bus, just like the lady said. Kendall was sort of jabbering the whole time, but he was okay, and it wasn't until our bus was pulling out that I noticed how many people were behind us. There were thousands of people covering the entire parking lot and going all the way back into the park. The good news was there were thousands of seats. I didn't think, oh, there are too few buses or anything like that. It seemed to me like everyone was going to get out of there. Once we were on the road and things calmed down a little bit, I realized something. Kendall wasn't jabbering. He was singing. And it was taking a minute, but he was singing this song they have in the park about the pirates. And he was singing kind of softly and then a little louder. And soon it's totally quiet on the bus. It's just the rain hitting the windows and wet people breathing and this kid singing. Then the guy next to us, not the pirate guy who talked to Kendall, but another guy, he starts singing too. And since we're on a bus mostly filled with employees and visitors, pretty soon the whole bus was singing. What were the words? Just a second. Fire off my cannon and blow my boat to bits. I'll swim with all my might because a pirate never quits. I use my ruthless cunning, my learning, and my wits to be my best companion because a pirate never quits. I was once to be married, my bride up there she sits, but I run back to my mateys because a pirate never quits. A pirate gets what he wants, and what he wants he gets. He's dependable and manly, and a pirate never quits. I'm not sentimental, but I'm going to remember that moment as long as I live because it changed the entire mood of the bus. Before we were kind of panicky and tired, and everyone was thinking, this is an emergency. And I was thinking, I'm going to do whatever is necessary to get back to my family and protect my son. But as soon as he started singing, you could feel the mood get better. Even the driver joined in, and he was getting increasingly bad reports over the radio. I heard one guy saying the road was starting to flood, and his voice was not calm. But we got out. We got out fine. The buses took us to the conference center about 30 miles west where the rain wasn't so bad. We had no trouble finding Suzanne and Kanan. I told you I'm not sentimental, but man, finding her and holding her again, it's strange. But our marriage has been better since then. I'm less kind of resentful, I guess. We feel stronger. We screw all the time. She's going to kill me for saying that. The problem after we found each other was getting back to Kansas City. We're in a small town. We were in a small town. I forget the name, and we didn't have a lot of options. It had a small airport, but any car rental was long gone. So I got the bright idea to find someone who looked respectable and pay him $1,000 to drive us home. Screw our luggage, screw our souvenirs. We just needed our beds. We found this guy whose name was Paul, who worked road construction, and he said they had canceled things for a couple of days, so he was basically free. So we all pile into to his Windstar and drive straight through. Kids slept most of the way, which was good. I paid for gas, gave him $1,500 and told him to watch us back. We were asleep in our bed a few hours later. From what I hear went down after that, we were lucky. There you go.
Wow, thank you very much.
You're welcome. I would like to remind everyone I am not an actor.
Well, also, I hope we don't get stuck in the same situation.
Oh, yeah, totally.
But okay,
Cool.
well, good luck with the rest of your books, and I hope
Thanks.
they come out soon. And yeah, thank you again for being on our show.
Absolutely. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
For more upcoming episodes of the Artsy Raven about writing and publishing, visit us at jfgarage.com/arpodcast. A reminder to Patreon subscribers that there is bonus content available for every episode on the Patreon website. If you enjoyed the show, you can show your appreciation by buying us some digital coffee. The Artsy Raven is produced by J.F. Garrard. The voice in the show's introduction is Chris Gorman, and music is by Tim Moore. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe.